of Words on Whiskey, brought to you by Irish Whiskey Magazine. If you're enjoying the show, please subscribe. It's a great help if you can all subscribe to the show. This evening, I'm delighted to have a very special guest, known to many, but not as many as should be. And he's been an unsung hero, really, in the Irish whiskey industry. He's been around it for decades. He's a gentleman, always willing to help, always willing to give advice, and very much behind the scenes of Irish whiskey in general. So I really hope that you can give him a warm welcome, and we can pose some questions to him there. So without further ado, I'm delighted to have Jack O'Shea. Jack, your hair is lovely. How are you?
Just noticed the few that are left are a bit tossed.
I'm the same challenge. You're doing well. Thank you very much, firstly, for joining us. I know you're quite busy, and I think you were partaking in a tasting just before coming on the show, the one that I'm supposed to be on as well. So you're very active still in a lot of the societies and a lot of the go to a lot of the tastings, Jack. You still have the same passion for Irish whiskey that you've always had from the beginning.
Oh, definitely, and it's a great honour to be asked to do this, because I'm basically one of the minnows in the industry. But you're right. I'm pretty active. I have my own company, and I help out the smaller guys. Basically, if somebody wants to commission a plant or get a plant up and running, I usually step in and give them a hand.
Yeah,
and
I know you've been involved in a lot of the startups, and of course you go back to previous times when you worked in the drinks industry as a distiller. And one of the things that just like people to know is, when I was looking to see what description should I put down for you, Jack, you very modestly said, not master distiller. So you wanted first, there are very few people with your experience for a start as a distiller. What defines a master distiller in your eyes?
I think somebody has about 40 years experience and has done it consistently. My kind of involvement with alcohol has been kind of on and off. I started back in 1979, back working in Chemical, which is now the Cooley Distillery. And we were making alcohol from molasses. And this was basically for Bailey's Irish Cream and for Smirnoff vodka and all the other vodkas. And all the creams in Ireland. We only ate creams back at that time. We kept an awful lot of them start up, but it's fairly straightforward. Like if you're making vodka, it's a very straightforward process. You ferment and you distill to purity. So you take out everything.
Yeah.
But if you're a whiskey distiller, it's completely different and far more complex. Because if you took out everything, you'd end up with vodka and you wouldn't have any flavour. So what you have to do as a distiller is to set your stills, set your cuts, set your temperature, set your times. And it's a very, very, I always compare it to golf. You know, when you stand up in the tee and you put down the golf ball and you swing the club, and there's only a tiny little spot at the top of the club that has to hit that ball. Now, of course, you look at the professionals, they're fine. But if you go over to one of the amateurs, you'll realise how difficult it is. So you've got to get everything right when you're making whiskey. So, as I said, I worked in Chemical up to 1985. Then for a number of years, I worked on environmental biotech. And then about 25 years ago, I joined Alltech. And I got back into alcohol then. And the initial one was the big alcohol plants in the States. We used to do quite a lot of work with them. And one of Alltech's customers was Irish Distillers. So I sold enzymes to Irish Distillers, and I just loved going down there. I just loved meeting those people, and we ran quite a lot of projects, and I used to do a bit of teaching down there as well. So
that's one thing I've noticed. Actually, your education, I'm going to have to read this, Jack, because there's so many qualifications that you have. So it's PhD, BA, BSc, MBA, MSc are your initials after the name. You're obviously a big believer in education. I see so many qualifications.
Well, I suppose sorry.
No, I mean, they're ranging from topics like philosophy, IT, down to distilling and brewing and computer applications, data processing, biochemistry, theology,
Yeah, yeah,
you know.
yeah,
So,
yeah. Yeah, I started out with theology first, so like I did my leaving cert in 1968. So I was a kid of the 60s. I had long hair and a big beard, and I was going to change the world. And back then there was a great optimism, and any old timers who were out there listening to me, they would be able to tune into it. But if you didn't live through the 60s, you can't really understand what a wonderful time it was. And I always remember there was about I thought it was about must be nearly 35, 40 of us in our leaving cert year, and sometimes we had three to a seat. But all these things didn't really matter. Now it's all about numbers and blah blah blah. But
yeah,
there was, I think, virtually half the guys in my class failed the leaving cert. But there was no point system. There was a kind of a positive attitude that everybody would, oh, you'll go to get something. So that was my initial career. I tried Catholic priesthood, and then I took a year out back in the early 70s, and I forgot to go back. So then I
did you
got
discover
involved with.
whiskey? Did you discover whiskey after you took that year out? Is that?
Oh, I remember at home as a kid, and if I wasn't feeling too well, my mum would get a big old earthenware mug and put a drop of Guinness into it and put some milk into it and stir it up and give it to me, you know.
Yeah,
And
different times.
a touch of brandy was great on the gums for a toothache or anything.
Yeah.
And there was always a bottle of poachine knocking around, but it was mainly for rubbing to greyhounds to loosen up their muscles.
So are you from Dublin, Jack? Are you a Dublin man?
Kerry.
Pardon?
Oh, no way. I'm not a Dublin man. Kerry
No.
man. Proud Kerry man.
All right, okay.
Yeah.
What brought you up to Dublin then?
As I said, 68 I joined the priesthood, and then I came up to Dublin to study. So I spent my initial degree was philosophy. So I did the philosophy with the Oblate Fathers, and I did a degree in UCD. Then I did theology in Milltown. So I was based in Dublin.
Right.
So
Okay.
then when I peeled out of that and tried another career, I tried teaching. I was in Dublin. So I left Kerry in 68, and I've never lived there since.
Okay.
Really get back to maybe once or twice a year. As my dear wife says, I always have to have my fix, go back and enjoy Kerry for a while.
So you're an adopted Dubliner?
No, I'm a Kerry man.
No, you never say that. I'm looking at the other qualifications you have. MSc in computer applications you did in '88.
Yeah.
Statistics in '91. You have an MBA.
Yeah.
Are you an eternal student? Do you believe in good education?
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Remember the period when that was one great thing working for Alltech. Pierce Lyons was a great guy, and he really believed in education, and he sponsored my master's in brewing and distilling in the Harriet Watt. But every company I've worked in, I've been lucky enough that education has been important, and even when I've had management roles myself, I used to say to people, I said, I don't care if you do crochet or you want to do fucking the lute.
yeah,
I'll sponsor you. I'll sponsor you anything you want to do, because if you do something and take up an education, take up a course, it's going to broaden your mind. It's like the MBA. I was a production guy, 100%, and pipes and pumps and fan belts and repair and maintenance and all that stuff.
yeah.
And then when I did the MBA, it completely opened up my mind to finance, to budgets, to return on investments and all this kind of thing. And so much so, I remember when I started the MBA, I was quite happy with my job.
Yeah.
And somebody said, well, 75% of people who start MBAs leave their jobs and take up something else. And I was one of those people that after a period of time, I saw that the company was going nowhere.
Yeah.
It was very successful, and it was nice, and I was well paid, but it was kind of stuck in a rut. So I decided to bail out. Then I joined Alltech.
Yeah.
So,
And what was the Alltech years like?
that
That was Alltech. You were down in Carlow. So you were the distiller down in Carlow?
Yeah, that was a very interesting project. Pierce phoned me up and he said, "Look, Jack, I have these Vendome stills. I want to bring them to Ireland and I want to start making Irish whiskey." I said, "Fine." So we went down to Seamus O'Hara in Carlow Brewing, and on a handshake, there was no contract, nothing, and on a handshake, the two of them agreed that Pierce would put the stills into Carlow Brewing and Seamus would do the front end. So we gave him the mash bill, we gave him the yeast, and he did all the fermentation. Then we pumped it in and we distilled it. And I had completed the Masters in Brewing and Distilling. Mm-hmm. So I took out all my notes, and this is the truth now. Took out my notes, had my two stills. I've been working in pipes and pumps for years, so there's no problem. Cut them all, connected up, took out the notes and started reading and refreshing my mind as to what all this stuff was about. And I started making whiskey according to the Harry's Watt notes from my Masters Brewing and Distilling course. So that proves to anybody out there that do a course, the stuff is good, and you might get a chance to use it. And this is one of the whiskies that I produced. This was a special. It's available in the airport only. There's only 1,000 bottles, cask strength, Pierce 5-year-old. And I call this my Harry's Watt whiskey because
that was all from the notes.
That was all from the Harry's Watt notes. Pierce offered me a few consultants, but there's somebody just described a consultant. A consultant is a guy who lives 50 miles away. And I talked to them, and because I did know, I'm not saying I know more than them, but I didn't think they were the fit for me. That like I was at the basics. I was down there trying to get my fermentations right, my temperatures right, my yields right, and then run my wash still right, run my spirit still right, do my cuts right, and I must say Irish distillers were of tremendous help. They're wonderful people, and they've done so much for Irish whiskey, especially small guys. There's one of the small guys who started up recently, a few months ago. Well, we weren't doing too well. Two much Irish distillers just walked in and told them exactly what to do. They're making wonderful whiskies. So Irish distillers are I'm a great believer in analysis.
Yes.
And, your nose is good and all that. But there's out there nowadays, there's HPLC, GC, there's some mass spec, there's some wonderful analysis. And I don't know if you can see that.
I see numbers, lots of numbers, that's it.
Okay. What it is the GC analysis of my whiskey, which Irish distillers did for me. And all these guys are the esters and the higher alcohols and the whole lot. And when you make a whiskey, you have to get all these guys, at certain concentrations. And then there are ratios. Then you have a group of compounds in here called higher alcohols, fusels. And they're very constant in a whiskey. And you got to get the ratios right on these. A lot of these other guys will change. Your esters will change and all that because a certain amount will be in fermentation, a certain amount of distillation. Yeah. But Irish distillers did this for me, and they said, "Jack, well, we discussed it with them, and basically,
I see the notes. Good, yeah, profile, yeah.
See, my fusels there were a wee bit high. If you compare those fusel oils with other whiskies, they're quite on the high side, and I would have probably changed my cuts a wee bit, but Pierce then decided to move the stills up to Dublin. So
how much trial and error is involved, Jack, in getting the mix you want? I mean, you could have the numbers right, but the flavor wrong, or is that not the case?
Not really. It's do I approach making whiskey? The old sense of smell. You have to stick your nose in the glass and get it right, and just make sure there's no off notes. Yeah. But how would I explain it? I think one thing you asked me was what makes a great distiller.
Yes.
And what makes a great blender? I asked somebody who was one of the top blenders in the country, and he says, "What makes a great blender?" And he says, "I probably have the same nose as everybody else, but I have smelled thousands of whiskies."
Yes, practice.
And it's much the same with distillation. You got to do it. like I had done the course and I got my master's and all that, and I could put MSc after my name, but it wasn't until I got down to Carlow and had to produce good whiskies that I really, that you learn, and that's what makes a distiller. I think he just has to do it day in, day out, and be prepared to take the knocks, be prepared to get things wrong, and be prepared to take advice. And it's just a combination of the whole lot.
This IBD course, International Brewing and Distilling, you're involved in that to quite a large extent, and a lot of people probably don't know. But I know that you've been extremely helpful to people behind the scenes on that course. And I think
I'm a registered tutor with the IBD, and I, especially the people who start out and do what's called the Sept in Distilling. If you want to get into this game, I would strongly recommend that you take up that course, the Sept in Distilling. It's an online course now. So what I do is I teach that particular course, and I love it. I love teaching, and
I can say that.
And the thing about the IBD what I love about their courses, day one you're making whiskey. There's no kind of we'll do chemistry for 6 months, we'll do physics for another 6 months, and we'll do English for another 6 months, and then after maybe a year or two we'll get on to distilling. Day one, the IBD are in there. This is how you make whiskey, and it's ideal because some guys say we'll join the course and they won't have a science background, but then they'll come to a certain stage and say, well, I need to do a certain amount of chemistry, but they'll do enough just to get them on to the next stage. They don't need a degree in it, and that's what I love about the IDB courses. They're so practical. They're well. They've gone in the direction of present, which I think is a kind of moving away from things, but they're well put together, but the exams are horrendously difficult.
Yes.
And they pitch the pass rate about 40 or something, and 40%. And if the pass rate goes up, I think they just make it more and more difficult for people to get through.
They have their quota.
Content and what they put out is they're world leaders basically on teaching people how to make whiskey.
Yeah. Is there anything, if anybody else wanted to go down the career path of distilling or blending or getting into the producing whiskey side, is it something you think you need, or are there other ways of getting in?
I would strongly recommend it. I strongly recommend the Sept in Distilling as a starting course. And the nice thing about it is you don't have to have a B in Honours Irish or higher maths or anything. You just sign up, pay your things about 600 sterling or something, and you're on the course and you get the material and you walk through it. And a lot of people know, some of the small distilleries I'm working with, I recommend to them, and most of them have taken it on. Like a while ago there, I did this course with Dingle Distillery.
Yes.
And those guys now will probably go on to the diploma next. Yeah. And the Burn, they've taken on this course and they've passed it as well. And since the old lockdown came, I've kind of restricted it a wee bit, and it's mainly now a kind of a one-to-one. Somebody will contact me and say, "Look, Jack, I've signed for the course."
Are you embracing this digital age? Are you embracing it?
Well, as somebody commissioning plants, you have to travel. Yeah. And of course, when I can't travel, I can't commission plants, so it's a wee bit difficult. Yeah. And things kind of came to I did very well last year, and I was doing well coming into this year, and had some nice projects lined up, and the good old virus put a stop to them.
When you started off, how many distilleries would there have been? Just 2 or 3, 4?
In Ireland?
Yeah.
Well, back in the 70s, there was only actually one distillery in Ireland, because Irish distillers owned Bushmills. Yes. Yeah. So there was only one distillery. And then it was Cooley that broke the mold. And then after that, the guys who actually broke the mold and had a go. And then now there's about 30 of them.
Yeah. What do you make of that growth? Jack?
Oh, it's brilliant, and it's fantastic, and we're still way behind. Like I think, I don't know, for our the gross product from distilling is at $1 billion, yes, whereas the Scots are 4 billion.
Yes.
And there's so much room, and there's room for everybody. But what I would love to see is that we borrow some things from Scotland. Now, I don't intend to borrow their technical file, which I think is far too restrictive. But what you have in Scotland, you have about 110 malt distilleries now, and you have 7 big grain distilleries, and they're all interrelated. They all buy and sell from each other. That's something I'd love to see happen in Ireland, is that when you have about 30 or 40 of these small distilleries, that they will buy and sell from each other. And how the small guys work is they produce a certain amount of whiskey and they sell it to the big guys, as like a Grant.
Yes. Yeah.
Grants will use that then in their blends. Like a simple blend would have 50 different whiskies in it. So you're a small guy, you'll sell your whiskies to the big guy, he gives you cash, then that kind of keeps the lights on and pays the wages. Then you develop your own distinctive brands and you sell those. So you have kind of 2 sources of income, and they're all interrelated, and the whole thing works. And it'd be great to see something like that happen in Ireland, that you'd have the small guys supplying the big guys and small guys supplying each other, so that that because to get really good whiskies, you need to blend different types, and hopefully it'll work that way.
Yeah, I mean, we had some good experience with it. We were on a tasting there together, Jack, the El Mulligan Scotch whiskey tasting, and that topic came up that the small producers produce a certain amount for themselves. They generally produce some malts for themselves, and then they produce whiskey that goes into some of the bigger companies like Johnny Walker or Chivas or things like that. And maybe that'll come here at some point. You mentioned the technical file, Jack. And there's obviously been a lot of discussion about the technical file recently over the last couple of years. Do you think that needs amending now, or is that still?
Oh
good?
yeah. Well, there's one clause in it which is causing problems, and that is the fact that you can put in your malt and your grain, but you could only add 5% of other cereals, like 5% of rye, 5% of oats, or 5% of whatever you want. Finon and other people have gone back and they've looked at the old recipes, and some of those have 10 or 15% oats. So people want that flexibility, and I think that's just the one clause that needs to be changed. And hopefully the people who are upset about it will go to the Irish Whiskey Association and say, look, let's put in an application to the EU and say, look, we just want this changed, and just say, instead of 5, make it 30 or 40.
Yeah, I think
And,
there's a consensus that 30 of the other would be. I see Brendan Carty's on, so I can feel his vibe of nodding in agreement with you there. I know he's a big proponent of producing non-GI compliant, as they say.
But the lovely thing about it is, an awful lot of the small guys that are working now are producing whiskey which does not fit the technical file.
Yes.
And they're merrily working away with different recipes. Okay, when it comes to marketing it, they'll be able to put whiskey on the bottle. They won't be able to put Irish whiskey. But, these will have a series of other brands. So all of a sudden they will have this brand that has 15% oats in it.
Yeah.
Okay, it doesn't fit the Irish technical file, therefore it can't be called Irish whiskey, but it can be called whiskey. So you have a bottle and you have,
Sorry, can it be called Irish whiskey, just not pot still? Or can it be?
No, I think the GI is Irish whiskey.
Right, okay.
And the GI says Irish whiskey. So to comply with Irish whiskey label on the bottle, you have to comply with the technical file. Okay. And if you don't comply with the technical file, then you can't put Irish whiskey on the bottle. So what the technical file does really is it tries to protect our identity as an Irish whiskey, and it's something that they can use in Eastern Europe, where you have all these people trying to rip everybody off. Armed with the technical file, you can go after a lot of these people and close them down.
from what you see out there in the market at the moment, Jack, and just the industry in general, what are our biggest challenges for the industry going forward?
I think business plans. When somebody comes to me, and I quote David Hines on this, if anybody approaches David and he said, look, why mention getting more interested in the business? And he says, well, have you 10 or 12 million? And they say, oh, no, well, maybe I can raise 1 or 2. And what people don't realize is it's a very, very expensive business. I remember Oliver when he set up in Dingle, and I met him. He was about a month or 2 into production. And he says, Jack, it's unreal. He says, it's not hundreds, it's thousands, that you need all the time to pay wages, pay materials, pay power bills, pay revenue, pay all kinds of things. And anybody who's involved or thinking getting into the business, I always give them the Glendalough business plan. If you want to get into this business, you want to get into whiskey, you want to start selling whiskey, go to West Cork or go to Great Northern and put a whiskey together, put it in bottles and sell it. And if you can't sell it, it means you have a difficulty. You may not be fit for the business. As John Teeling says, it's easy enough to make whiskey, but it's a heck of a job to sell it. And people don't realise that's, they think, okay, well, I'm going to put up a distiller, I'm going to make this wonderful whiskey, and people will break down the door to try and get it. That's not the case. It's difficult to sell. So what I say to these people, okay, start out, put stuff in a bottle. Okay, you'll invest a couple of 100,000. You won't have invested your millions.
Yeah.
And okay, it works. And then get your site and then put up your visitor centre. Yeah. Because a visitor centre is a great source of income, and it's also a great route to market. Yeah. Like you get somebody into your visitor centre and you spin them a good yarn, you could have a customer for life. And visitor centre, and then tack on the distillery at the back, and that's what I would recommend people to do. But I've said this a lot of people, there's guys out there, and they've got this site, they've built a distillery, they're making whiskey, and they're going to wait 4 or 5 years before it's called whiskey, and then they're going to put it in bottles, and then it'll take them another 4 or 5 years to develop the market. So there'll be 10 years will have elapsed, they will have spent millions, and they'll be just starting in the market.
Yeah. I mean, with 33 distilleries now operational, and yeah. I'm hearing numbers of 80, in total. Do we have enough distillers? Do we have enough trained people to be able to handle that?
We probably we don't have enough blenders.
Okay.
Definitely. And that's the thing that people are like, I'm not a blender, and I really admire blenders because, okay, if you're a distiller, you make the stuff and you put it in the casks, but then a blender, say, Billy down in Irish Distillers, he has to make 4 or 5 million cases of Jameson every year, and it's the same as last year. And he has about 50 warehouses. He has pot still. He has pot still in bourbons, first, second, third fill. He has sherries. He has ports. He's all this. He's got tankers of this stuff.
Yeah.
Like to actually do that. And if one of those bottles are wrong, he could mess up a whole batch. And blending is an amazing skill.
Well, would you say it's a different skill set, completely obviously, to distilling, but as complex, or if not more complex?
Far more complex.
Okay.
I think it's far more complex because I don't know if you've ever tried it, and you line up a number of whiskies and you blend it, and just a fraction of something can change the whole taste of a blend. And it's like Powers John's Lane. That's one of my favourite whiskies, and I was presenting it recently for the Irish Whisky Society.
Yeah.
And it has only a tiny amount of sherry. It's I think Dover has about only 4% sherry. Yet no, that sherry has a tremendous impact.
Yeah.
And
the biggest impacting factors for you, Jack, in terms of what affects whiskey. Obviously, the cask is a big thing, and there's a lot of talk lately about the different grains and terroir. What's your thoughts on terroir?
I better keep this clean. I don't buy into it.
You don't? No.
No. And well, okay, it's nice and all that, but yeah, you can be smelling around and maybe you get different flavors and all. But I've heard another version of it, and what happens then is you take that stuff and you say, okay, well, slightly different. You put them into casks, and it's going to be in casks for 3 years.
Yes.
And there's an amazing what's going to happen. So I think after 3 years, it'll be hard to find your terroir. It's like water. People run about water, and you know, basically in the developed world today, water is of a very high quality, and you have an EU directive which is very, very stringent. And like when you turn on your tap and you can put your cup and you can drink the water, you don't realise that there's a guy working in a plant who's under severe pressure and under a horrendous spec to get that water right for you. So basically, if you're starting a distiller today, the water quality is good. Now, the only thing I would say about water is if you're in a hard region, you're going to get good fermentation. And the reason you're going to get good fermentation is because your water is high in calcium. And calcium is a wonderful, wonderful element. And it does a whole lot of good in your fermenter. And you basically, if I'm working with a distillery and they're in a soft water area, I always tell them to add gypsum, which is calcium sulfate, to the mash.
So regions with a good lime scale produce harder water and presumably help the fermentation process.
Yeah, and it all comes from the limestone. And if you look at bourbon, the bourbon guys, they will also always go to a limestone region. And one of the main elements in limestone is calcium. Yeah. And I saw some recent, one of the big distilleries in one of the big bourbon guys bought 250 beside his distillery because it was limestone region, and he wanted to preserve it. You know, I felt like phoning him up, and I said, keep your money and buy a bit of gypsum.
Yeah, it's a cheaper way of doing it than. But we were talking about there the qualifications and the experience and the skill sets that are needed to support these distilleries. So at the moment, you think we're okay in terms of the number and the qualification of the people that are available, or do you see that as being a bit of a shortcoming in the future?
I've seen some startups which have been a disaster because they've taken in young people. And it's not the people's fault. It's just that they don't have the experience. Yeah. And for weeks they've produced absolute rubbish, and they bought the wrong type of cask, and so they put rubbish into rubbish casks. And they, I think from day one, you have to have an experienced distiller when you're commissioning a plant. Now, I've been asked to commission plants which are horrendous. They've put in all the wrong stuff, and then they kind of like these guys have worked kind of contact with over the years, and then they put something together and they phone me up and say, Jack, we know everything installed. Would you like to come down and start it up? And I go down and cripes.
Yeah. So what distilleries have you been involved with, Jack? Can you mention them?
Well, of course, the Pierce Lyons one.
Sure.
And then when I moved up to Dublin, I helped them commission that plant as well. It's very funny going back to my analysis. You know.
Yeah.
I told them my fuses are a bit high because my second cut is late. Jack, we're changing nothing. We're doing everything exactly the same as you did in Carlo.
Right. Okay. So, you kept them the same.
Yeah, I was involved with them. I did a bit of teaching with the Dingle guys. I commissioned the Acton plant. Now, if you want to go and visit a super duper plant, properly built, properly installed, and good people running it, go down to Achill. It's the Irish American distillery. It's absolutely amazing, and it's been built and structured for visitors, and it has just the right amount of automation.
Yes, I mean, I saw they opened
100% automation.
Yeah, that's on our to-do list for sure, is to go down there and go and visit them.
It's an amazing plant. I've been involved with Glendalough. Glendalough I've put in a small plant, and been involved with the Burn.
The Burn's a very interesting one now because they're using their own Irish casks, is it?
They have, yeah. They have their own 100% Irish oak.
Yeah, there's a lot of.
Yeah. It's but you have to be careful when you use Irish oak like that. If you look at the way Irish distillers use the Irish oak casks with their dark oak, they use it as a finisher.
Yes.
Because if you look at the bourbon, guys, this is something that always fascinates me. Bourbon, distilled, put into a brand new cask. How does it work? You take an Irish triple distilled, which is a light spirit, you put it into a brand new cask. The cask will just kill it.
Yes.
And I think the reason is if you look at bourbon distilleries, as somebody said, the bourbon guys are not distilling, they're just buying distillation. So I think when you're a bourbon distiller, you're taking off an awful lot of stuff, heads, tails, and all the rest. And I think that good, strong mix going into a new cask is what works.
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, they're their own cask. I've also been involved with trying to get various brands up and running, and this is probably the latest one I'm working with. Can you see it?
Okay, Sailor's Home. Who's that?
It's a guy called Keane Quilty.
Okay.
And he's a gent, a first-class businessman. And he has just bought out. And if you see there's a name there in the corner.
Oh, yes. Oh, very good. You have your signature on it. Very good. So,
That was one thing about Baltic. Baltic, like I made the stuff for Baltic, but I would never put my name in the bottle. No, I signed bottles for charity events, and I signed bottles for people who want them signed. But Pierce's name went on the bottle. And as somebody pointed out to me, they said, "Well, Jack, who paid for it?"
Well, okay.
So,
I mean, how well did you know Dr. Pierce Lyons? Did you know him well?
I've known him very well. I knew him long before I joined the company. I joined the Oblate Fathers, and Pierce's brother was an Oblate priest. So then I knew the family from way back from the early 70s. And it was when I was working at the company, I'd done my MBA and I was a wee bit restless. I phoned Pierce and I said, "Pierce, I'm thinking of moving on. Have you a job for me?" He said, "I have, yeah." He said, "Yeah." He said, "No problem." And we met over Christmas in the Westbury, and we just discussed a few things. And following year, I started with him.
Yeah, no formalities, just on a handshake, I assume, and on a discussion, and that was it.
But Pierce is not. Pierce would hire people at airports, you know. He'd meet them at the airport and he might like them. He'd fit in the team. And he hired a guy who was a waiter one time at a restaurant, and he turned out to be a great guy. So he was. So he hired me. So basically, he'd hire anybody.
Such a pity he didn't get to see.
Well, he was a one education and helping people and pushing things.
Yeah, I mean, even his charity in the US is committed to helping students and things. So he's left a legacy, that's for sure.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
definitely. Well, when he was, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to go on. I mean, very much yourself. You're obviously hugely, and I know you're hugely into education. And what a lot of people won't know is that, other than helping with the IBD, you're very encouraging and very supportive of students in general in their studies. I think it was it last year or the year before? I met you at one of the college's final year project presentations, and you had that student that was working with you. So it's just, I have to say, you really get involved in helping people, and I hope people get to realize how much work you do behind the scenes that isn't really acknowledged. And I just wanted to see that what you've done for the industry is phenomenal, and that you've always done it with great dignity and humility. And you know, if I've ever had a question, you've always been there to answer any technical questions or even non-technical ones. It's great to hear some of the old stories from you as well, even about some of the old distilleries and times in Alltech. What do you make now of the way things are in the industry?
Well, I think the virus is going to do a lot of damage. The big guys, there's no problem. They're going to come through. A lot of the small guys who didn't get a product up before the virus,
Yeah.
I think no, they're going into a different environment, and it's going to be more difficult. But I think they'll hang in. I think there's room for them.
Yeah.
But they got to realise that they have to sell the stuff.
Yeah. Deep pockets.
Yeah, and Board B have been fantastic.
Yes.
Absolutely amazing. Like, and I usually refer people Board B and Board B, take people under their wing. They'll bring them to conferences. They'll help them as best they can, and they're an amazing organisation.
Yeah. There's a nice comment from Conor O'Hare. Jack is a great teacher. He's helped me out on a few courses. Thanks, Jack. And actually, when I posted that you were coming on the show, I got so many warm comments about you, Jack. So I'm glad that you came on, because there's an awful lot of affection for you there. One of the other things that you're very heavily involved in is the whiskey societies. So, you know, the Irish Whiskey Society, I've seen you at other societies as well, the Aviators, of course, as well. What do you make of these virtual tastings that are happening now? Obviously, it's not the same as meeting somebody in real, but
yeah, it's the best we can do, and I think that they're working pretty well. And you've probably been involved a lot with Michael Fogarty recently, and I always had my kind of favourite Scotch whiskies like Highland Park, and I like some of the Islay whiskies, but I never really got a great handle on it until I started joining in Michael's tastings, and I find them amazing, and I've learned an awful lot from them. But I'm on both committees. I'm a committee for the Aviators and the committee for the Irish Whiskey Society. Two very different organisations. The Irish Whiskey Society are kind of formal, but they've been very lucky that we have Brian Greene at present as a president, and he's fantastic. Full-time job. That job as president.
Yeah. Oh no, it is. He's put in a huge amount of work into the Irish Whiskey Society, and I think the society has seen the benefits of it. He's actually online here. I can see him. Been fairly quiet for a while, for a change, but yeah. Is there any questions anybody would like to ask Jack? Because it's a great opportunity to get an answer there.
Mine may not be the right one.
Well, speaking of trying other whiskies, I wasn't aware that you actually have a very great gift for the Scottish whiskies as well. You do know a lot about them. We were talking there at the last one. Is there a particular favourite you have there, or what do you make of all this?
Highland Park.
Yeah. And Brendan is asking, Brendan Carty is asking, what's your favourite Irish whiskey? I presume he's asking.
Powers John's Lane.
Powers John's Lane, yeah, that's one of mine too. It's a hard one to beat.
Yeah, I think for the price and for the quality, and it's what I love in a whiskey.
Yeah.
It's
and Brian Greene is asking, what's your favourite international whiskey?
International. I like Maker's Mark. Well, I don't know. International, like if I want to celebrate or I want to take a nice drop of something, my international whiskey would be Powers John's Lane. If I want a nice Scotch, Highland Park definitely, and I think Maker's Mark is a good beverage.
Any particular Highland Park?
But I have I think there's a 12-year-old.
Yeah. I've tried their 12-year-old over the years, and they do vary year to year as well, quite a lot. So it's worth always having a good check to see what that is.
Yeah, another whiskey I have there somewhere. Oh, yeah.
I'm eyeing some very fancy whiskies back there.
I don't think so. This one got some time ago.
Oh, Yamazaki. Okay. Okay.
Beautiful
Yeah.
beverage. And what I love about the Japanese are they're not tied by any kind of thing. Like they actually buy in Scotch into their whiskies, and they make a thing called coffee malt. They make
Yes.
malt on a coffee stand, which you're not allowed to in Scotland. And they're not restricted by any kind of regulations. All they concentrate on is quality and making good whiskies, and they make some wonderful, wonderful whiskies.
Yeah. I mean, their distillation processes. You see 5, 6, and more stills in one of the Japanese distilleries, often more. And I don't know what way they combine them all. As a distiller, Jack, because formerly, I suppose, distilling is what you did. What is it? What are your parameters that you have to play around with? Is it just cuts, or is it direct heating? It's the shape of the still. It's the angle of the neck. So many different parameters.
No, it goes back to fermentation.
Really?
And unless you have all these guys, you see these guys here? Most of those are going to come out in fermentation. Everybody says, okay, 60 or 70% of the flavour is made by the cask, but it's made in the cask working on these guys. And if they're not there at the right concentrations to begin with, you won't have them in the cask. So you start with fermentation, and you've got to get your fermentation right. Of course, you have to get your gravities right, because if you don't have efficiencies, you won't make any money, because you'll be losing money. So you've got to get your efficiency right, but as well as getting the efficiency right, you have to make sure that you get a good quality spec in the fermenter. And
so you've got how many are there in that list? About 25, 30?
About 30, I think.
And how many are in
that would be a standard analysis for Irish distillers. They would do that on virtually every batch they run.
Yeah. And the difference for somebody that's not a distiller and may not know the technical side, what does triple distilling give you over double distilling, and vice versa?
Triple gives you far more control, and it gives you far more options. Double distilling is very straightforward. Sorry, but getting back to the question you asked around like what's important or other, the fermentation is important, and then of course the distillation and the cluster are important, and the whole shebang. But the last question was to do with
double versus triple distillation.
Yes, double versus triple. The old Alzheimer's is kicking in. Double has, you wash it and they put it into your pot, and that's it. But if you have three stills, right? And if you look at Springbank, they call it 2.5, because they take some of the high-low wines from the wash still and they bypass the second still and they put it into the third still. And then Macintosh take the final faints from the middle still and they put it back into the feed for the second still. So you have all these permutations, combinations, and if you look at some of the Ger Garland, when he talks about the mod pot and the trad pot and all this, and how they do it, this is what triple distillation allows you to. And also triple distillation allows you to produce a very, very nice light whiskey, because by the time you get that third distill, you're up at the high concentration alcohols. You're far away from the heavier guys. Now, if you want some of the heavier guys, you can add them in, or you can do, as Irish distillers do, you do several different types of distillation. So you'll have a trad pot with some of the heavier guys in, and then you will have a mod pot with less, and then the low wine pot or whatever, with the narrow cut. So that's what triple distillation is. Whole lot of different varieties, lot of different distillates, and when they're all mature, then they're going to have different characters, and then you can blend them all to make the whiskies.
Right. One question in here from Kevin O'Connell. He's asking, what do you make of German whiskey? And I'm not.
I'm afraid I'm not too familiar with it. I heard of one some time ago. But most of my German pals drink Irish whiskey, so
Yeah.
I'm not that familiar with it.
Yeah, I don't know if Jason's on here
As,
tonight, but
as they say in the West, no comment.
no comment. Yeah.
But I believe Finland is supposed to be making good whiskey.
Yeah, Finland.
Sweden
Yeah.
have a whiskey, and it seems to be doing well. Any
If there
country
was one
can
company,
provide it to you.
if there was one distillery that you see that you really like what they're doing at the moment, and one that is working or not working with you, what would you say it is? Who should we be looking out for as producing great whiskey?
Well, talking about Ackle, like Ackle have made the investment. They've spent the money, and they've put in their absolutely first-class equipment and all that. One that I haven't worked with, and I think are going to go places, is Clonakilty. Clonakilty have a very nice blend, and I like their distillation, and I like the slopes and their lime arms, and I think they have the ability to produce good stuff.
Yeah. One of the questions I was going to ask you with Ackle is: are Ackle going to be maturing on the island as well?
Yeah,
they will. So do you foresee see influence?
Yeah, definitely. And they have units. It was a brewery, and they've turned into a distillery. But there are 3 units on that site, and the other 2 are empty. So I think what they'll do is they'll fill their own units first, and then they'll store in the other 2 units. They'll take them over.
Yeah, I mean, they've really been focused and persisted through difficult times. I know how they had their loss there at the distillery as well. So they've had some difficult times, but I'm really excited. That could be a game changer for the island as well. In terms of bringing people onto the island, I think that's going to be a huge game changer, and tourism in general. So, I mean, obviously, tourism is playing a huge part in a lot of these distilleries. The likes of the dealing with the COVID now obviously has had a huge impact. How are these companies set to cope without having the visitor centres open? Are they able to survive?
Yeah, it's going to be a big loss for some of them, because I remember talking to a guy, he's a consultant to some of the Scottish guys, and he was saying, if you're building a distillery, you build it on a tourist trail. That's the first thing you do, he says, because as I said, your visitor centre is, it's a source of income, but it's also a huge route to market.
It's a branding exercise as well.
Branding, definitely, yeah. So losing out on, but I was down in Dingle there a few weeks ago, and their numbers were very good. And what they said basically was that it's now the Irish coming in. They said in the past it was mainly English and American, but said no, they have a whole lot of Irish people, because the Irish people are staying at home, they're in Dingle.
Yeah.
So go and visit the distillery.
Yeah.
And Ackle have just opened up their visitor centre, and it's bombing. They're doing very, very, very well.
I'm looking forward to going there. Jack, when you're not involved in doing things with whiskey, what do you like to do? What are your hobbies? I'm
a big DIY guy. I have a real super duper shed. It's there were builders in next door recently, and they saw the shed I have, and they said, "Crap, you could live in that." And I can, according to my grandchildren, I can fix anything, but a lot of things they throw at me I can't fix. But I do a lot of DIY, and I like it. I like tinkering with things and trying to figure out how they work and try and fix them.
Taking things apart and putting them back together.
And going back to my old clerical days, I help out in the local church as well, a couple of days a week.
Okay. I mean, that was quite a change in direction, if you don't mind me saying, like from theology to producing whiskey.
Yeah.
Any regrets?
Oh, no. Well, lovely family, so.
If you were to look back and see who's been your biggest influence, who would that be?
Well, I've never been asked that question before. Probably different times and different different place. I'm just trying to think. Probably, I spent 5 years studying for the priesthood, and I met some amazing guys who probably had a big influence on me because I grew up at home. I was the only boy in a family of girls, and you can imagine I had an Irish mother who thought this son was wonderful.
Yes.
And I left home with not even being able to boil an egg, So I think those 5 years were crucial to kind of influence me and give me a sense of values. And I'm still in contact with a lot of the guys
That's
I met.
great.
I've met some actually great idiots, amazing guys.
Yeah.
And it's terrible that the small percentage of priests who have done the wrong thing have, spoiled it for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. Typical times for the
You
church
didn't,
and the
you,
clergy.
I didn't think we'd be discussing this on a whiskey talk.
No, not at all, not at all. Well, look, I know that you've had a huge influence on many people. You've helped many people.
Yeah.
It goes very much behind the scenes, and it's not acknowledged as much as I feel it should be. You've been a tremendous ambassador for Irish whiskey, and you've done it in such a noble and a humble way, Jack. So certainly from myself, I want to thank you for everything you've done for the industry, for what you've done for us, the support you've given us, and the industry as a whole. I know the sentiment in the audience is very much the same, and I want to wish you all the very best in the future, and to thank you, and look forward to meeting you in person again.
Yeah,
I'm sure at some society meeting.
I must meet this guy. I must meet this guy you're describing.
No, everybody's saying it. Everybody says it. So thank you very much indeed, and thanks for your time this evening. And
It's been an honor.
No, the honor is ours, really, genuinely. There's many people that do help the industry, but I think you help the students, the people that are novices, as well as the experts, and you do it in a gentle and quiet way, and in a humble way. So that's what I really love about you, Jack. So thank you very much. I won't keep any longer because I know you have a tasting to go to after this. I hope I might catch you there. Thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure.
Take care. Well, that was an honor to actually have Jack on. I'm delighted. He's such a gentleman, and he's done so much behind the scenes for so many people. And he's always open to questions. So thank you very much. If you've enjoyed the show and you're enjoying the podcast, please do subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's YouTube.com/Irish Whiskey Magazine. And we have a very interesting guest lined up next week, and I will provide more details on that. If you want to find all our podcasts in one place, you can go to our irishwhiskeymagazine.com website. And thank you for returning to normal hours, and have a good rest of the week and stay safe, everybody. Thank you.